Okay, so auditing. So what it is, so auditing is in a normal circumstance would be like double checking essentially, or like checking to see if everything is matches the records you're checking. But in an IT perspective, an audit is an examination of the management controls within an IT infrastructure. So this evaluation of these IT systems determine whether data assets are being safeguarded and their integrity being maintained. So this assessment also provides information regarding how organizations' goals or objectives are being met through the use of information security and IT. So we come to security auditing. So a security audit is a high-level description of the many ways organizations can test and assess their overall security posture, including cybersecurity. So we have three assessment types, one-time, tollgate, and portfolio. So a one-time assessment are security audits that you perform when you like introduce something new into the system, for example, new software, or for a reason like something triggers this event to happen. So you need to have like a bunch of tests and audits that you run to discover any new risk you're introducing by using this new entity. A tollgate assessment is either a yes or a no to the usage of a new process or software or hardware. In this case, you determine that if what you're introducing is going to prevent you or prevent other processes from moving forward. So if it does, you would say no, and if it doesn't, you would say yes and implement this new process into your existing system. A portfolio assessment is regularly scheduled. They occur annually, biannually, or whenever you decide. These are used to verify that your security processes and procedures are being followed and they're adequate for the current business needs. So some of the benefits a security audit would provide a business is that it would verify that their current security strategy is adequate or not to meet the needs of the current state of the business. It would check that your security training efforts are working. So this would be observing if your employees are maintaining the standards that they were taught to follow. It would uncover any extraneous hardware or software. So this is like bloatware or unneeded pieces of equipment that is currently in the system, but it's not like useful. Reduce the cost by nixing the use of unnecessary resources. This just means you just stop using these resources because they're obsolete. Um, Another thing security audits or they uncover is that they would find the flaws introduced by new technology or new processes. So in this case, you would perform a one-time assessment. And it also proves how the organization is compliant with regulations and standards. So we have a security audit process. So our first step is to define the assessment criteria. So we would first determine the overall goals the company needs to address in the audit, and then we break those down into departmental priorities. And then these your departments or whoever is going to perform the criteria agree on how it will be performed and which departments or entities keep track of it. Our next stage is to prepare for the security audit. So we would prioritize your success criteria and business objectives. So you have to align your business objectives to the top of the list. So not every item is a top priority, and not every top priority requires maximum effort. So you would select the required tools and methodologies to meet these goals, and then find and create a method to gather the correct data. So our next stage, we come to conducting the security audit. So we need to provide the appropriate documentation for all the systems within the organization, and then monitor the progress of the audit and also the data points for accuracy. And we use previous audits and new information from the current audit to link and to create linkages and find new information that wasn't previously found. And our last stage is to complete and share the results. So we share the results with all the previously determined parties which were agreed in the first stage as to who will perform and track the audit. And we create a list of action items based on the audit findings. So these action items are the things that need to be fixed. And then we prioritize the fixes to remediate or solve the security items discovered. So this is where we take our action items and just prioritize them low to high based on the business objectives. Okay, so audit trails, these is like a breadcrumb trail, I guess. You can follow it back to its source. They maintain a record of system activity, both by system and application processes and by user activity of systems and applications. So these assist in detecting security violations, performance problems, and flaws in applications. So in an IT context, we first have application-specific audit trails. So these ideally record each application, so they give business relevant events and data. So these may be logged into text files or in separate database tables. So they allow the reconstruction of the history of the use of that application. So next we have application logs. So this is like a broader category, like it looks at all the applications instead of a specific one. So some of these things may not be part of the audit trail, such as exception stack traces and debug messages. So they may be useful, especially in the case that there is no dedicated application-specific audit trail. So next we have database logs. So these could be things like logged queries or change data capture or change tracking functionality or some other audit trail functionality. So these database logs provide the auditor with a way to keep track of all the required information and audits or changes being made to the systems throughout the entire organization. The next type of trail we have are operating system logs. So these are like event logs for system and security groups on the various devices used in the organization. So these would contain things such as like Windows event logs and the variable audit log if it's using Linux. So next we have access logs. So these access logs for web servers can be a part of the audit trail, especially for internal systems such as internal like organizational systems like their intranet. So this is like where a source IP address can be more easily mapped to a particular user. And lastly, we have network logs, such as routers and firewall activity. So these network equipment generate a lot of data that may be seen as part of the audit trail, although most of the data they produce isn't actually, or most of the time isn't related to what an auditor is looking for. So collecting the logs and data from all of these entities, they would be collected and put in like a central place where they can be searched, correlated, and analyzed. Okay, and now we have problem management. So problem management is a way to control the process of a problem isolation and problem resolution. So there are three main goals of problem management. The first one, to reduce failures to a manageable level. The second one, to prevent the occurrence or recurrence of a problem. And three, to mitigate the negative impact of problems on computing services and resources. So some of the areas you would want to look for problems are the performance and availability of computing resources and services, the system and networking infrastructure, some procedures and transactions, and the safety and security of personnel. And now we have a problem correction workflow. So first, a problem pops up. So the problem is detected and it is logged to keep track of it. And then the problem is then categorized, be it like a hardware problem, a software problem, or a human resource problem, conflict between two employees perhaps. So then it is prioritized. Either it's a low priority, high priority if it causes major problems within the organization, and then an investigation into the problem to see why it's happening, which brings us to how to find workarounds, which leads us to checking a known error record database. So if the current problem is new and it's not in the KED, it's recorded there. If it's found in the KED, we can come up with a resolution and we can close the problem. And if it's not in the KED, we can check with development or suppliers to see if the problem occurs on their end, such as faulty hardware or software or crashing software. And then we can issue a workaround from there, which leads to problem resolution and closure again. And then we can have a major problem review, which just reflects on how this problem occurred and how we can prevent it in future instances. And that is the end of auditing.